3 days ago, they were the most open they had ever been with you. You talked about the future out loud, not in a joking, someday, maybe way, but for real. Maybe they told you something they'd never told anyone. Maybe you both cried. It felt like the exact thing you'd been waiting your whole life to feel, and it felt like they felt it too. And now they're gone quiet. The paragraphs shrank to one-word replies. The one-word replies turned into nothing at all. Maybe you're blocked on everything. Or maybe you're sitting there right now, watching a message sit on delivered, refreshing, telling yourself they're just busy, they'll write back, it's fine. And there's one question running on a loop in your head, the one you've probably typed into a search bar at 2 a.m. with your stomach in knots. And it's some version of, what did I do? Why did they run the second we actually got close? So let me be straight with you before we go one sentence further, because I've sat with hundreds of versions of this exact story and the pattern almost never changes. You didn't do anything wrong, and I know that's somehow harder to hear than if you had, because if you'd made a mistake, you could go fix it. You could apologize, adjust, try again. This one doesn't work that way. You cannot behave your way back to the version of them you had 3 days ago, and realizing that is what makes people feel like they're quietly losing their mind. Here's the name for what you're standing in the middle of. It's called separation, the stage where one person pulls back hard, often right after the connection hits its highest point. The one who pulls away, we call the runner. You, the one still here, still reaching, still trying to make sense of it, you're the chaser. And before anyone comments, this has nothing to do with gender. Plenty of runners are women, plenty of chasers are men. It's about the role each person is playing in the retreat, not about who they are. Now, the reason I called this video 5 Reasons Your Twin Flame is Running, instead of How to Get Them Back, is that you can't do anything useful about the running until you actually understand what it is. And almost everything you've been told about it is wrong. Running is not rejection. Read that again if you need to. When someone rejects you, they've weighed you and decided you're not enough. That is not what's happening here, and the tell is the timing. Rejection doesn't wait until the most intimate, most vulnerable, most we just said, the real thing moment to show up. That's the exact moment running shows up. People don't flee from something that means nothing to them. You don't sprint out of a room that's boring you. You sprint out of a room that just got too hot to stand in. And running is not a strategy. It's not a game they're playing to make you chase. The runner isn't sitting at home congratulating themselves on how well the silent treatment is working. In almost every case I've seen, running is unconscious, a defense reaction that fires before the thinking part of the brain even gets a vote. They genuinely believe they're making the calm, logical, adult decision to step back. They have no idea they're running from anything. That's what makes it so confusing from the outside. You're watching a person flee a burning building while calmly insisting there's no fire. So let's actually get into why. Not the vague, they have issues version. The specific mechanics. The first reason is the simplest one, and it's the one people skip right past because it sounds too obvious to matter. It was too much, too fast. And the intensity itself is what spooked them. Think about how a normal connection is supposed to build. You meet someone, you like them, and over months the feeling turns up slowly, like a dimmer switch, a little more light each week, so your eyes have time to adjust. A twin flame connection doesn't do that. It skips the dimmer entirely. It hits full brightness in about a week, and the other person is standing there, with their eyes watering, unable to see, every instinct in their body screaming that something is wrong, because nothing is supposed to feel this big, this quickly. That's the piece most people miss. The runner isn't overwhelmed because the connection is bad. They're overwhelmed because it's real, and it arrived with zero warm-up. There's even a name for the stretch right before they bolt. The community calls it the bubble, that short, almost unreal window where everything is perfect and you both feel wide open and safe. The bubble is beautiful. The bubble is also exactly what breaks the runner, because the human nervous system does not actually know what to do with that much closeness that fast when it's carrying old wounds underneath. And every single one of them is carrying old wounds underneath. Which brings us to what those wounds actually are. Because they got scared is true, but it's not the whole story, and the next few reasons are where this starts to make real sense. For most runners, the fear underneath the running isn't fear of you at all. It's fear of what being fully seen has always cost them. Which leads straight to the second reason, and it's the one that reframes everything. They're not actually running from you. They're running from their own reflection. There's an idea in this work called the soul mirror. Your twin reflects your inner state back at you, and you reflect theirs. You're not two strangers slowly learning each other. You're standing in front of a person who, just by existing near you, lights up every unhealed thing they've spent years not looking at. So when the runner got close, they didn't only feel love. They felt every old wound that love has ever pressed on, activated all at once. And it was easier to blame you and leave than to keep standing in front of that mirror. There are two wounds this usually lands on, and which one your person carries changes how the running looks. The third reason is a rejection wound. Somewhere back in their history, being fully open led to being hurt, dropped, or humiliated, and their body wrote a rule. Openness is dangerous. They can go years without that rule getting tested, because most relationships stay shallow enough that it never comes up. Then you arrive, and the connection is so intense it drags them straight into the exact vulnerability their whole system was built to avoid. Leaving isn't them not loving you. It's them obeying a survival rule they wrote when they were 8 years old. The fourth reason is a different animal, a freedom wound. Some runners don't fear being hurt. They fear disappearing. To this kind of person, deep closeness doesn't register as safety. It registers as a threat to their whole sense of self. They feel the pull toward you, and an alarm goes off. If I let this in, I'll lose myself. I'll stop being a separate person. You feel the space between you as abandonment. They feel the closeness as suffocation. Same relationship, two people having opposite emergencies. That gap is the whole reason this hurts the way it does. Strip out the spiritual language, and this maps almost perfectly onto something therapists have written about for decades: the anxious avoidant pattern. The chaser runs anxious. Space feels like danger, so you move closer. The runner runs avoidant. Closeness feels like danger, so they move away. Two nervous systems wired in exact opposition, each one's coping move setting off the other's panic. Worth knowing, because it means this is a documented human pattern, not a curse someone put on you. And that's the fifth reason, sitting underneath all the rest. Their nervous system flipped into fight or flight and chose flight. This isn't a metaphor. When the ego can't make sense of a pull this strong, it doesn't file it under love, it files it under threat, and the body answers threat the only ways it knows. Some people freeze. This kind runs. What looks from the outside like a cold, calculated exit is, inside, a person in full-body panic, doing the one thing that quiets the alarm, making distance. That's why logic bounces off them when you try to reason them back. You're bringing a spreadsheet to a fire alarm. So what does this actually look like? You deserve to recognize it, not just feel it. Sometimes it comes dressed as a mature decision. They sit you down and say something clean. This is too much too fast. I need to focus on my career. You deserve someone who can give you more than I can. It sounds so measured. That's the point. The tidy logic is the packaging the panic wraps itself in. Sometimes they don't leave, they just dilute. Suddenly, it's text only, never calls. They want to just be friends, while still liking every photo you post, still surfacing at midnight, still acting in every way that counts like they're in love with you. They're not toying with you. They're keeping the connection at a dose low enough that it stops tripping the alarm. And sometimes there's the one that guts people, the fast, tidy rebound. 2 weeks after the deepest thing they've ever said to you, they're publicly dating someone conventional, someone they once called nice, no real spark, and posting about it a little too brightly. Hear what that actually is, because it'll save you weeks of agony. That relationship isn't the upgrade, it's a shield. They ran to someone who could never light them up the way you did, precisely because that person can't. Low voltage feels survivable. You didn't lose to them. You're the thing they're being used to hide from. This is where honesty matters more than comfort, so I'm going to slow down. Everything I just described assumes one thing, that the love is real and fear is what's driving the exit. That is not always what's happening, and this framework can be twisted into an excuse. So here's the line in plain words. A real runner shows cracks. The feeling slips out through their eyes, their voice, the things they do when they forget to guard themselves, right up until the ego slams the door. If instead you've got someone consistently cruel, who lies, who runs hot and cold to keep you off balance, who makes you feel small, that's not a runner. That's an abuse pattern, and it needs a different response than patience. And if the cracks aren't there at all, if they're simply indifferent, treat you like a nuisance, have told you plainly they feel nothing, this might not be a twin flame running. It might just be someone who isn't in love with you, and I'd be doing you harm to dress that up as a spiritual test. Do not use the word mirror to explain away someone hurting you. Mirror work never requires you to tolerate disrespect. If your safety, physical, emotional, financial, is on the line, the spiritual reading comes second. It just does. If you've read all that and still can't tell which one you're in, that's not a flaw in you. It's the single hardest question in this whole experience. And it's exactly what the real versus false checklist in the Twin Flame Compass walks you through, sign by sign. So you're working from discernment instead of hope. Once you can see which pattern you're actually standing in, the question stops being why did they run and becomes what do I do now? And almost none of that answer is about them. Here's the part nobody wants to hear when they're in it. The most effective thing you can do about a runner has almost nothing to do with the runner. I know how that sounds. Every cell in your body is pointed at them right now. What to text, when to reach out, what you could say to fix it. So let me tell you what actually moves this, starting with a phrase you've heard thrown around and probably never had explained. No contact. Most people hear no contact and think it means don't text them. That's the smallest part of it. The real work is energetic no contact, and it's harder because it happens inside your own head where nobody can see you cheating. It means you stop checking their profile at 1 a.m. You stop rereading old messages hunting for the moment it went wrong. You stop narrating your day to an imaginary version of them. The framework says all that silent monitoring sends a thread of desperate energy towards someone whose nervous system is already fleeing intensity, so you're feeding the exact thing you want to stop. Believe the energy part literally, or don't. It barely matters. Underneath it, there's a plain truth. As long as your whole inner life is organized around a person who left, you haven't let go of anything. You've just made the leaving quieter. So what do you do with all that attention once you pull it back? You point it at the one wound this is actually here to show you. When the runner left, they didn't invent a feeling in you. They pressed on one that was already there. Whatever came up when they disappeared, I'm not enough, I'll always be left, love never stays, predates them. They just turned the volume all the way up. That's the real work of this stage. Not analyzing why they left, but turning toward the raw feeling they exposed, and healing it in yourself, because you're the only person who is ever going to reach it. That's what mirror work means when the term is used honestly. Not tolerate bad behavior. Look at the wound the connection lit up and tend to it. There's a harder cousin to this, and it's the one that finally sets people free. Surrender. And I want to be careful, because it's the most misused word in this whole space. Surrender is not waiting more patiently. It's not a cleverer way to get them back where you fake letting go and keep checking whether it's working. It's genuinely stopping trying to control the timeline, accepting that whatever this connection is, it exists, and it doesn't need you to force it into the shape you wanted by Christmas. It's taking them off the pedestal and putting your own life back at the center of the frame. Your career, your friendships, your body, the things that were yours before they walked in. Stop being the waiting room and become the main event again. And here's the part that sounds almost too convenient, so I'll just say it plainly. In this framework, that shift is often what changes things on their end, not because you performed detachment well enough to trick them, but because when you genuinely stop chasing, the runner isn't feeling pushed for the first time, and people who ran from pressure sometimes turn around once it stops. I'm not going to promise you that. Anyone who hands you a reunion date or claims to know exactly what your specific person is thinking is selling you something. What I'll tell you honestly is that recalling your energy is the only move here that helps you, whether they come back or not. If they return to a whole person. If they don't, you've spent that time becoming someone who no longer organizes their life around an empty chair. There's no version of this work where you lose. One more thing, because it lands right in the middle of all this and throws people. During separation, the signs often get louder, not quieter. 11:11 on the clock. Their song in a store you've never been to. A dream where they're holding you and apologizing at the exact hour they're coldest in real life. The instinct is instant. This is a message. I'm supposed to reach out. Slow down. These aren't green lights to text. They're anchors. Something to keep you steady in the dark so you don't collapse into despair. Not a signal to break the no contact that's doing the work. Let them mean stay the course, not break it. So if you're sitting there tonight with the phone face down, fighting the urge to flip it over and check, that discomfort is not you failing. It's the old wound asking to be fed one more time, and you not feeding it. That's the work. The entire work, happening in real time, in the least glamorous moment possible. Not in a grand gesture. In one quiet Tuesday night, where you leave the phone alone and go do something that's yours. You're not waiting for them to come back. You're becoming someone who's fine either way. Do that long enough, and honestly, everything else, whatever it turns out to be, sorts itself out from there.